George evicted a black single mother without giving her a second glance. But when she walked into the office as his new boss, it sparked a battle that would forever change their lives. What happened next will shock even the most seasoned observers. But let's start from the very beginning. Catherine James, a black single mother, comes home one day carrying a bag of groceries only to find an eviction notice on her apartment door. Her heart sinks. She has just 7 days to vacate the home that has been her and her 8-year-old son Matthew's last refuge from life's storms. That evening, George Bennett, her landlord, enters the apartment to confirm his decision. He is a middle-aged white man with an air of superiority. In a dismissive tone, he explains that her overdue rent is unbearable and that the law is on his side. Catherine tries to explain her circumstances, that she lost her job due to downsizing and has been actively applying for new opportunities. But George waves her off, stating coldly, "Your problems aren't my problems. Business is business." The next day, Catherine desperately searches for a solution. She calls friends, seeks assistance from charitable organizations, but every attempt is futile. Her pleas to George for an extension are met with mockery. "I'm not a charity," he says, laughing. A week later, Catherine and her son find themselves homeless. Matthew cries as Catherine holds him close, vowing that she will find a way. Using her last savings, she rents a cheap motel room and spends the night preparing her resume and sending out job applications. That night marks a turning point for Catherine. Her despair transforms into resolve. She vows not just to recover, but to change her life and fight for others who face similar injustices. 2 weeks after the eviction, Catherine receives an email inviting her to interview for a position at a prestigious company. It's one of the few applications she managed to send amidst her struggles to find temporary shelter and care for her son. Hope and fear battle within her. Can she prove she deserves this chance? On the day of the interview, Catherine puts on her best suit, bought with the last of her money, and leaves Matthew with a neighbor at the motel. On her way to the office, she mentally rehearses her responses, battling the anxiety that churns in her stomach. She is greeted by 3 company executives who listen intently as she discusses her previous work experience, professional skills, and leadership philosophy. "Why do you believe you're the right fit for this position?" one of them asks, scanning her resume. Catherine answers honestly, "I know what it means to fight and overcome adversity. I can not only organize processes, but also inspire people to perform at their best. I'm ready to prove it." Her confidence and sincerity leave a strong impression. The next day, she receives a call informing her that she's been hired as the new head of human resources. On her first day at work, Catherine steps into a sleek, glass and steel building. She is greeted warmly by her team, and during the morning meeting, she is introduced as the new department head. For the first time in weeks, she feels like her life is finally turning around. After the meeting, a colleague mentions that the company's building is managed by an external contractor. While signing documents related to office operations, Catherine notices a familiar name on the contract, George Bennett. Her heart skips a beat. Could this really be the same man who evicted her? Later, during a meeting with contractors, she sees him again for the first time. George enters the conference room with his usual self-assured smile. At first, he doesn't notice Catherine, but when their eyes meet, something familiar flickers in his expression. However, he doesn't immediately recognize her. "Let's discuss the contract details," he says as he takes a seat, his tone condescending, as if he's fully in control. During the discussion, George interrupts Catherine several times. At one point, he sneers, "Maybe we should leave these decisions to the professionals," when she suggests a more flexible leasing policy for employees. Catherine replies calmly, "Professionalism isn't just about efficiency, it's also about respect for people. We'll revisit this later, Mr. Bennett." Her composed response silences him, though his expression hardens. Later that day, Catherine reviews her new responsibilities and learns that her role includes overseeing the contractors, George's company among them. She now has the authority to renegotiate terms and implement standards for how landlords interact with tenants. This realization fills her with newfound strength. She understands that she has a unique opportunity, not to seek revenge, but to challenge the system that allowed someone like George to exploit his power unchecked. The game has just begun, she tells herself, preparing for the next phase of her fight. Weeks passed, and Catherine had fully immersed herself in her new role. She actively implemented initiatives to improve working conditions for employees. However, every attempt to bring about change was met with unexpected resistance. George, realizing her growing influence, began working against her subtly. He delayed tasks, undermined her proposals with sarcastic remarks, and made her path deliberately more challenging. During one meeting about office leases, George interrupted her again. "Your ideas are far too naive for a company of this scale. We're here to make money, not run a charity." His words created a tense silence in the room. Catherine, however, remained composed. She responded firmly. "Successful businesses are built on respect and trust. We can achieve both if we approach this the right way." Her calm but confident tone silenced George. Catherine decided to take a strategic approach. She began gathering complaints from employees about George and his company. One worker admitted that George had demanded additional payments for non-existent services. Others described his arrogant behavior and threats when they refused his unreasonable demands. Catherine documented every detail. Soon, she met with the company's legal team to begin preparing for a review of the contract with George's firm. This move didn't go unnoticed. George stormed into her office, trying to figure out what was happening. "Are you trying to set me up?" he snapped, his usual smug demeanor absent. Catherine replied calmly, with a hint of irony. "I'm simply ensuring that our employees work in safe and fair conditions." Tension escalated. George attempted to undermine her credibility, spreading rumors among contractors that Catherine was an inexperienced novice. He even arranged a meeting with senior leadership to discuss what he called her unjustified initiatives. However, Catherine came prepared. At the meeting, she presented evidence, employee complaints, inflated contract rates, and even witnesses willing to testify. George tried to accuse her of disrupting established processes. "She's interfering with work we've been successfully managing for years," he argued. Catherine calmly opened her folder of documents and stated, "Here's what the employees think of your work." She read out several complaints, backing each with concrete facts. The leadership was stunned by the evidence. George was asked to explain the violations, but he mumbled vague excuses about misunderstandings. After the meeting, one of the executives told Catherine, "We'll be re-evaluating the contract with his company. Thank you for your proactive stance." George, visibly shaken, left the room, finally realizing that his power was crumbling. For the first time in years, he looked at Catherine with a mix of confusion and the dawning awareness that his actions had consequences. A few days after the confrontation, Catherine received a letter from the leadership team. They asked her to lead a meeting with contractors to discuss new standards of partnership. This was her moment, a chance to establish fair rules and show George that the balance of power had shifted. At the meeting, Catherine outlined the new terms of cooperation: mandatory contract reviews, a more transparent payment system, and stricter ethical guidelines. "Our goal is to create an environment where employees and contractors work in fairness and respect," she said, looking directly at George. George tried to push back. "These changes will increase costs. You do realize that's impractical?" But his words lacked their usual confidence. Catherine replied calmly, "Whether it's practical or not is no longer your concern. The company has decided these standards are non-negotiable." After the meeting, the company officially terminated its contract with George's firm. The decision sent a strong message to all contractors that the era of impunity was over. In a fit of anger, George confronted Catherine in her office. "You've ruined everything I've built over the years," he shouted. Catherine looked at him steadily and replied, "You destroyed it yourself with your actions. I just revealed the truth." Days later, Catherine received an unexpected message from George. He asked to meet her. Curious but cautious, she agreed. At the meeting, George appeared subdued, almost broken. "I was wrong," he began. "I realized my approach was selfish. I never considered the people my decisions affected." Catherine didn't rush to forgive him, but saw sincerity in his words. "Acknowledging it is the first step," she said. "But change requires action. Are you ready to prove that?" In the weeks that followed, Catherine's initiatives began to show results. New contractors operated under fairer conditions, and employees felt more secure in their roles. The company issued a public statement committing to higher ethical standards in partnerships. George, to Catherine's surprise, started volunteering at the company's charitable events, clearly trying to amend his ways. When they crossed paths again, he thanked her. "You didn't just change the company, you changed my life. Thank you." For Catherine, this was more than just a victory. It was the start of a new chapter. She had proven not only her resilience, but also her ability to transform the world around her. Looking at her smiling son, she felt proud to have given him a role model of strength and determination.